Good evening, everyone. Welcome to live streaming of basic transfer pricing. Tonight, our topic would be about the cost related to intangible product development as part of compensation package offered to employees. Ito yung mga employee stock option, no? And our case to be discussed is the case of Xilinx Inc. and Consolidated Subsidiaries versus the Commissioner of Internal Revenue. This is an old case, no? Kasi ano pa to, decided to na 2009, which was filed in 2000, decided in 2010, filed in 2009, no? This is a US tax case, no? Okay. Shout out, Tari.
Wala pa pong shoutout.
May viewers na ba tayo?
For viewers.
Okay. So, shout out po sa ating four viewers, no? And yung last week, hindi po tayo nakapag live stream kasi nga lockdown, no? So, ngayon lang tayo ulit nag-resume. Although, still lockdown, pero we try it na makapag live stream tayo, no? And so what is this cost related to intangible product development as part of compensation package offered to employees? This is a different employees packages program, no, that the company made, especially in the US, to retain their employees, no? So parang mga promo nila for the employees as part of their retention program for the employees, wherein they allow or offer stock options, no, to the as to make their employees as part-time owner of the company. Okay. So we will discuss about this Xilinx in and consolidated subsidiary. What is this case all about, and what is this Xilinx Inc. No, Xilinx Inc. is a U.S. company based in California, and the functions of the company is manufacturing. No, manufacture siya ng mga programmable logic devices na binibenta nila, no, as part of the uh, spare parts ng mga devices, no. Okay. So this case is filed in the United States Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit, no, for the Ninth Circuit na ng Court of Appeals. Okay. So Xilinx Inc. and Consolidated Subsidiaries is the petitioner here, appealee versus the Commissioner of Internal Revenue, respondent, appellant. No? So for the opinion, the judge here is Fisher, no, Judge Fisher, a circuit judge. On this appeal from the tax court, the judge decide whether under the tax regulations in effect during the tax years, anong tax years ang involved dito na 3 years, no, 97, 98, and 99. Related companies engaged in joint venture to develop intangible property must include the value of certain stock option compensation one participant gives to its employee in the pool of cost to be shared under a cost-sharing agreement. Why? Kasi ang stock option, no, stock employees compensation is part of the cost or expenses incurred in the development of intangible. So it should be divided between the group, no? Kasi part siya ng cost. Even when companies operating at arm's length would not do so. Kasi the taxpayer or the Xilinx Inc. here was able to prove that the independent companies are not charging the cost of employees' compensation to their claim deductions. No? So the tax court found related companies are not required kasi malabo pa yung batas ng US at the time, although the laws were subsequently amended in 2017 to clarify these issues, na yung stock option should be included as a cost, no, to be shared between the group. The tax court found related companies are not required to share such cost and ruled that the Commissioner of Internal Revenue's attempt to allocate such cost was arbitrary and capricious, no? So hindi raw dapat na i-allocate or i-share yung cost. That's why yung decision of the Commissioner of Internal Revenue to allocate the cost of these employee stock options are arbitrary and capricious. Why? Because there is no law that requires that the employee stock option or compensation should be charged to cost and subsequently divided or shared between those members of the group who are developing the research and develop or doing the research and development for the development of intangible. So we reverse and hold, sabi ng court. Number one, related companies in a cost-sharing agreement to develop intangible must share all costs related to the joint venture if unrelated companies would not do so. So this is the decision na dinala sa korte, no? Stock option for which companies claim tax deductions are a cost under former 26 CFR Section 1.482.7D1. Ito yung transfer pricing law nila. And number three, such costs are related to intangible product development as part of the compensation package offered to employees involved in activities under the joint venture. So this is the decision na brought to court, no? In appeal ng Xilinx Inc. And for your information, the court in this case rule in favor of Xilinx. No? So talo dito ang Commissioner of Internal Revenue. So we will discover how this the court ruled in favor of the taxpayer and against the Internal Revenue. No? So background, Xilinx Inc. researches, develops, manufactures, markets, and sells integrated circuit devices and related development software systems. So nasa technology, no? Software. Xilinx wanted to expand its position in the European market and established Xilinx Ireland in 1994. No? So meron na siyang subsidiaries in Ireland. As an unlimited liability company under the laws of Ireland, XI or Xilinx Ireland sold programmable logic devices and conducted research and development R&D. No? Kasi pagka nasa programmable logic devices ka, of course you have to do research and development to develop the product. Kasi yan po yung tinatawag natin na intangible. No? Parang artificial intelligence. No? So two wholly owned Irish subsidiaries of Xilinx owned XI during the tax years of 1997, 1998, and 1999, the only years at issue in this appeal. So these are the 3 years, no, na year under litigation. Kasi pinadalhan dito ng assessment ang Xilinx ng Commissioner of Internal Revenue. Why? Kasi inallocate nga niya yung cost for employees option. So, kasi kinlaim lahat ng Xilinx US. Siyempre, lumaki yung kanyang deductions, lumit ang income. So what the commissioner did, binawasan yung stock options compensation na kinlaim ng Xilinx Inc. in US. So pag binawasan mo yung expenses, naturally the profit will go up and the tax payment or the income tax payment will increase, no? So lumaki yung deficiency income ng Xilinx sa US. So in 1995, Xilinx and XI entered into a cost and risk sharing agreement, no? Known as the agreement, which provided that all right, title, and interest in new technology developed by either Xilinx or XI would be jointly owned. No? So jointly owned. So if jointly owned, of course, the cost also of development is shared. No? Under the agreement, each party was required to pay a percentage of the total research and development cost in proportion to the anticipated benefits to its from this new technology that was expected to be created. No? So ano ba yung when you conduct research and development for the development of the intangible, mayroon kang expected na new technology to be developed. Specifically, the agreement required the parties to share, number one, direct cost, defined as cost directly related to the research and development of the new technology. So yun yung mga cost that would be incurred in the development of this new technology. Including, sa direct cost ito but not limited to salaries, bonuses, and other payroll costs and benefits. So under the direct cost, kasama dyan ang salaries, bonuses, and other payroll costs and benefits. Another expense that can be claimed is the number 2, indirect cost, defined as cost incurred by departments not involved in research and development. Kaya nga indirect cost siya that generally benefit R&D, pero benefited sila ng research and development. So including but not limited to administrative, legal, accounting, and insurance cost. Number 3, cost incurred to acquire products or intellectual property rights necessary to conduct research and development. So yun yung number 3 na cost incurred. No? Ito ano na to sa related na to sa intellectual property rights, no, to conduct research and development. The agreement did not specifically address whether employees' tax options or issues were a cost to be shared. No? So, sided sila about the employees' tax option. Pero kung ako, ang interpretation ng employees' tax option should be included in the salaries dito sa direct cost. No? Kasi ano yung direct cost? Ito yung salaries, bonuses, and other payroll costs. So, diyan siya kapatak sa other payroll costs, no, and benefits. Xilinx offered ESO, or employees' tax options, to its employee under 2 plans. No? Under one plan, employees were granted options. So, in this case that we are discussing tonight, the discussion will revolve around employees' compensation, no? Employees' option. So, paano nila ginawa itong scheme na to, no, na nag-charge sila on employees' tax option. So, under the employees' tax options, there are 2 plans, no? So, under one plan, employees were granted options as part of the employee hiring and retention program. The options were of 2 varieties, no? Yung employees' tax options niya may 2 klase pa. The incentive tax options or the ISO and non-statutory tax options or the NSO. No? So employees could exercise these options 2 ways naman. So 2 ways. How can they exercise this option? Okay. Number 1, by purchasing the stock at the market price on the day the option was issued. So pwede nilang i-purchase at the market price, which is what is called as exercise price, regardless of its then current market price, or number 2, by simultaneously exercising the option at the exercise price and selling it at its then current price, pocketing the difference. No? So under the other plan, employees could acquire. So when we say pocketing the difference, tumubo, no? So under the other plan, employees could acquire employee stock purchase plan shares or ASPPs by contributing to an account through payroll deductions and purchasing stock at 85% of either its exercise price or its market price on the purchase date. Ito yung ginagawa ng mga companies, especially in the big companies, no? So Xilinx has more than 4,000 employees. So tama nga naman, while you offer at saka publicly listed ang Xilinx ano siya, listed siya sa Nasdaq, no? The stocks exchange. So instead of offering only to the public nung shares of stocks mo, so why not offer it only also to your employees? Kasi sa dami ng employees mo, it can also be that the employees are also interested in purchasing shares of stocks of the corporation that they where they work, no? So to make them as part owner. So in-offer nila itong stocks options with different plans and different options, no? Which we already discussed. Okay. So employees must always pay taxes on NSOs, no? Yung non-statutory stock options. But have to pay taxes on ISOs, no? Yung incentive stocks options and employee stock purchase plan shares o yung ASPPs. Only if they sell acquired stock shares before a specified waiting period has expired, no? A disqualifying disposition. Why disqualifying disposition? Kasi may time, no? May time required. So, of course, pag hindi pa umabot yung time, disqualified ka. In determining the research and development cost to be shared under the agreement for tax years 97, 98, and 99, Xilinx did not include any amount related to ASOs. So, wala siyang in-include na amount related to employee stock options, no? But of course, meron sila na incur. In tax years 97, 98, and 99, Xilinx deducted as business expenses. No? So, dinidak niya, kinlaim niya yung business expenses. No? 26 USC, Section 83 and 162, approximately 41 million, 40 million, and 96 million respectively, based on its employees' exercises of NSOs or disqualifying disposition of ISOs and ESPPs. No? So, anong nangyari dito? Nagdeduct siya ng business expenses. No? It also claimed an research and development credit under 26 USC Section 41 for wages related to research and development activity, of which approximately 34 million, 23 million, and 27 million in the respecting years. Ano yung respecting years? 97, 98, 99. Were attributable to exercised NSOs or disqualifying disposition of ISOs and ESPPs. No? So, nag-claim din siya ng wages. Okay. So, furthermore, in 1996, Xilinx and XI, ito yung Xilinx Ireland, entered into two agreements that allowed XI employees to acquire options for Xilinx stock. Both agreements provided Xilinx Ireland would pay Xilinx for the cost of the Xilinx Ireland employees' exercise of the stock options, which was to equal the stock's market price on the exercise date minus the exercise price. No? Kasi ang exercise price usually lower para naman makagain yung employee. No? And there is an option there na you pay, the employee will pay only 85%. No? So may tubo na siya kaagad na 15%. kung ibebenta niya yung stocks options at 100%. No? Okay. Both agreements provided XI would pay Xilinx for the cost of the XI employees' exercise of the stocks options, which was to equal the stocks market price on the exercise date minus the exercise price. So in the 1997, 98, and 1999 tax years, XI paid Xilinx 402,978, 243,094, and 808,059, respectively, under this agreement. No? So, nagbayad yung Xilinx. No? Xilinx, Ireland. No? Okay. So the Commissioner of Internal Revenue, the Commissioner, issued notices of deficiency against Xilinx for tax years 97, 98, and 99, contending ASOs or employees' tax options issued to its employees involved in or supporting research and development activities were costs that should have been shared between Xilinx and XI under the agreement. So, pag in-share mo yan sa XI, liliit yung expense mo, lalaki yung income mo. Specifically, the Commissioner concluded the amount Xilinx deducted under 26 U.S. Section 83H for its employees' exercises of NSOs or disqualifying dispositions of ISOs and ESPPs should have been shared. No? So, yun ang sabi ng tax court. It should have been shared. By sharing those costs with XI, Xilinx deductions would be reduced, thereby increasing its taxable income. No? So, syempre, pag dinagdagan mo yung deductions, tataas yung taxable income mo. So, the Commissioner determination resulted in substantial tax deficiencies and accuracy-related penalties. So, na-discuss na rin natin to sa iba pang nating discussion about the tax cases in the U.S. na there is an accuracy-related penalty. Ano tong accuracy-related property? These are the penalties that the taxpayer incur by failure to report income in its income tax return. No? So, siyempre, kulang yung reporting mo of income sa income tax return mo, liliit lang yung income mo doon. So, there is an accuracy-related penalty imposed. Okay. The Commissioner of Internal Revenue, the Commissioner issued notices of deficiency against Xilinx for tax years 97, 98, and 99, contending ASOs issued to its employee involved in or supporting research and development activities were costs that should have been shared between Xilinx and XI under the agreement. Specifically, the Commissioner concluded the amount Xilinx deducted under USC 26, Section 83H for its employees' exercises of NSOs or disqualifying disposition of ISOs and ESPPs should have been shared. No? By sharing those costs with XI, Xilinx deduction would be reduced, thereby increasing its taxable income. No? So the Commissioner determined resulted in substantial tax deficiencies and accuracy-related penalties. No? Xilinx timely filed a suit in the tax court. Siyempre, nag-protest agad si Xilinx. The tax court denied cross motions for summary judgment. After a bench trial, the tax court found that two unrelated parties in a cost-sharing agreement would not share any cost related to ESOs. After assuming ESOs were cost for purposes of 26 CFR Section 1.482-7DL, the tax court then found 26 CFR Section 1.482-1B1, which requires cost-sharing agreements between related parties to reflect how two unrelated parties operating at arm's length would behave. No? So, ni-require. This positive and concluded the commissioner allocation was arbitrary and capricious because it included the ASO in the pool of costs to be shared under the agreement, even though two unrelated companies dealing with each other at arm's length would not share those costs. So anong contention ng Xilinx dito? Na the Commission of Internal Revenue requires them to allocate the cost, but the independent parties or yung companies, no, the doing or manufacturing similar product to that of Xilinx is not yung independent companies is not doing it, or hindi sila nagcha-charge ng cost, no, on the employees' tax options. Okay. The commissioner timely appealed on appeal. So ito namang commissioner nung nag-appeal ang Xilinx, nag-appeal din siya, no? So the commissioner timely appealed. On appeal, the parties focused primarily on whether the requirement in 26 CFR section 1.482(7)(d)(1) that all costs be shared between related parties in a cost-sharing agreement, or the requirement in 26 CFR section 1.482(1)(b)(1) that all transactions between related parties reflect what two parties operating at arm's length would do controlled, no? So ang binasihan talaga ng Xilinx dito in its protest, no, against the findings of the examiner is that walang independent companies na nag-allocate or share ng kanyang cost with the other members, no? So after oral argument, we requested supplemental briefing on whether ESOs were cost and whether they were related to the intangible product development for purposes of Section 1.42 ng US Tax Code, no? And whether a literal application of 26 CFR Section 1.482 would conflict with a tax treaty between the United States and Ireland that was in effect during the 1998 and 1999 tax years. Ano yung tax treaty? Tax treaty, same with the tax treaty also din natin, no? In this case, tax treaty of US and Ireland, no? At ano yung specific provision in the tax treaties that is being questioned in this case? The Article 9 of the tax treaty nila. No, ano, what is that Article 9? That is about associated parties or the related parties, no? So yun yung ating transfer of arm's length principle. So standard of review. Decision of the tax court are reviewed on the same basis as decision from civil bench trials in the district court. So DHL Corporation versus Commissioner. Thus, we review the tax court's conclusion of law de novo and its factual findings for clear error, no? So ni-review ng Court of Appeals ang trabaho ng tax court. Pero dito sa Pilipinas, ang Court of Appeals natin at saka yung tax court natin, same level na lang po sila, no? Kasi dati, yung decision ng Court of Tax Appeal, pwede pa siyang reviewin ng Court of Appeals, which is the same in US, no? Yung decision ng Court of Tax Appeals can be reviewed by the Court of Appeals, no? Pero sa Pilipinas ngayon hindi na. Same level na yung Court of Appeals at saka yung Court of Tax Appeals. Ano ba yung Court of Tax Appeals? Lahat ng mga cases na protested cases coming from the lower courts or coming from the IRS, nire-review yan or dinadala yan sa Court of Tax Appeal, no? And then, pagka halimbawa yung there is already a decision and the taxpayer would want to protest. Dinadala naman yan ngayon sa Court of Appeals. Sa Philippines, iba. Kasi if the decision of the Court of Tax Appeals, sino lang yung pwedeng mag-review sa kanya? The Supreme Court. Okay. Standard of review. Decisions of the tax court are reviewed on the same basis as decisions from civil bench trial in the district court. Thus, we review the court's conclusion of law de novo and its factual findings for clear error. Bakit conclusion of law de novo? Bago, no? So, discussion, the commissioner does not dispute the tax court's factual finding that unrelated parties would not share ESOs as a cost. Instead, the commissioner maintains ESOs are a cost that must be shared under Section 1.482(7)(d)(1), even if unrelated parties would not share the same. No? So, anong sabi ng commissioner? Kahit hindi pa gagawin niya ng independent parties, pwede itong i-share yung cost. No? So, yung Section 1.482-1B1 and Section 1.427D1 are irreconcilable. No? Why irreconcilable? Magkaiba sila, no, ng provisions. And Section 1.482(7)(d)(1, the more specific of the two controls. No? Okay. So, Congress has authorized the Secretary of Treasury to allocate income and deductions among related business entities to prevent tax avoidance. May ano na tayo? Oh, sige. Sige, shout out muna.
Shoutout po kay Sir June Sarmiento. Good evening daw
Okay,
po, ma'am.
good evening po.
Pati po kay Miss Cupcake.
Hi.
Apo.
Hello, Miss Cupcake. Tagal din.
Apo. Sabi niya po, ma'am, good PM and stay safe po sa lahat.
Yes, sobra po talaga. Kailangan stay safe po talaga. Ang dami talagang na victimized na po yung COVID. Sige.
Next, ma'am, si...
Yung tatay daw ni Sir Eugene may COVID.
Ha?
Positive. Okay. Sige.
Tapos, si kay Ma'am Rosalina Tune rin po. Shoutout.
Yes.
Sabi niya, ma'am, maayong gabi daw, ma'am. Elsa.
May gabi eh.
Long time no hear.
Yun, no time no here. Complete lockdown po. No? Sige.
Sila ba lang po?
Sige. So, safe po sa lahat, no? Ang daming victim talaga, no? Ang dami. Yung mga hospitals natin punong-puno na naman. And complete lockdown po dito, napakahigpit po talaga, no? Buti ikaw, Hari, nakalusot ka.
Opo. Naipit lang, ma'am.
Na ano ka?
Daming nahanap.
Sinita.
Opo.
Anong hinahanap?
COE, ma'am. Kumuha ko kagapot na gabi.
Certificate of Employment. Tapos,
Tsaka,
okay. Bawal po talaga eh. Kasi kahit mga employees, work from home na lang eh. No? In any case of two or more organizations, ito na yung irreconcilable na dalawang provisions na sinasabi dito, no? Sa Xilinx. Congress has authorized the Secretary of the Treasury to allocate income and deduction among related business entities to prevent tax avoidance. At saan niya nakikita? Doon sa tax treaties, no? So, there is a tax treaty between the US and Ireland, no? So, ano nakalagay dito sa tax treaty na to? Nasabi dito, nag-authorize yung Congress, no? Sa Treasury. Ito yung very powerful statement of the arm's length principle na nandun sa Article 9 of the OECD Model Tax Convention. No? So ito yung nakalagay dito. But in this case, kasama dito yung involved dito in the United States. So in any case of two or more organizations, trade or businesses, whether or not incorporated, whether or not organized, ito yung Section 482, no? In the United States, and whether or not affiliated or owned or controlled directly or indirectly by the same interest, the Secretary may distribute, apportion, or allocate gross income deductions. If you try to look at this, this is also the same as Section 50 of our National Internal Revenue Code. Huh? Allowances between or among such organizations, trades, or businesses, if he determines that such distribution, apportionment, or allocation is necessary in order to prevent evasion of taxes or clearly to reflect the income of any of such organizations, trade, or businesses. In the case of any transfer or license, ito yung wala sa tax code natin, no? Itong paragraph na to. In the case of any transfer or license of intangible property within the meaning of Section 936H3B, the income with respect to such transfer or license shall be commensurate with the income attributable to the intangible. Ano tong ibig sabihin ng commensurate to income attributable to intangibles? It is not enough na yung valuation mo ng intangibles is only the cost of the research and development. You should include the income that will be earned by that intangible. No? So ito naman yung 26 USC Section 482. No? Ito naman, the Secretary in turn promulgated regulations to. No? Yung isa, tax code provisions, yung isa, regulations. No? Authorizing the commissioner to allocate income and deductions among related entities. The introduction to this regulation explains the purpose of Section 482 is to ensure that taxpayers clearly reflect income attributable to controlled transaction and to prevent the avoidance of taxes. Yun naman talaga kasi kahit sa Section 50 natin, to avoid tax evasion. So yun po talaga yung purpose, no? So, with respect to such transactions, Section 482 places a controlled taxpayer on a tax parity with an uncontrolled taxpayer by determining the true taxable income of the controlled taxpayer. This section sets forth general principles and guidance to be followed under Section 482. So, ito na yung ilagay mo ng ang controlled taxpayers at par or similar at parity with that of the controlled taxpayers. So anong ibig sabihin? The related parties and the unrelated parties dapat similar, no? So yun ang arm's length principle. CFR Section 1.482, the next subsection states that the standard to be employed in every case to ensure taxpayers accurately reflect income from controlled transactions and do not avoid taxes through such transactions in an arm's length standard. No? So, nawawala yung arm's length eh. No? Yun ang pinag-uusapan dito sa case na to. Nawawala yung arm's length. Why? Kasi when we say arm's length, we have to compare the related parties with that of the independent parties. Eh, ang sabi ng Xilinx dito, hindi sila dapat na include yung cost kasi ang independent parties, hindi nila to ginagawa. So, ibig sabihin, tama yung ginagawa ng Xilinx dahil tama, sumusunod sila dun sa ginagawa ng independent parties. No? So, in determining the true taxable income of a controlled taxpayer, the standard to be applied in every case is that of a taxpayer dealing at arm's length with an uncontrolled taxpayer. A controlled transaction meets the arm's length standard if the results of the transaction are consistent with the results that would have been realized if uncontrolled taxpayers had engaged in the same transaction under the same circumstances. Kaya nga, yung comparability analysis natin, no? Arm's length result. However, because identical transactions can rarely be located, whether a transaction produces an arm's length result generally will be determined by reference to the results of comparable transactions under comparable circumstances. So hindi madali yung mag-compare, no? Kasi there are differences. Wala talagang perfect na comparables, no? There are differences. That's why acceptable yung range, no? May range lang. Okay. So, CFR Section 1.4821B1. Another section, however, specifically governing cost sharing agreements between controlled parties to develop intangible property authorizes the Internal Revenue Service to make its controlled participants share of the cost as determined under Section 1.427D of intangible development under the qualified cost sharing arrangement equal to its share of reasonably anticipated benefits attributable to such development. Kasi ano ba yung rule ng OECD sa cost sharing arrangement? Commensurate to the benefits, no, and cost shared by the party, no? So CFR 1.4827A2, controlled participants must include all cost in the pool of cost to be shared proportionally the all cost requirements. So ito yung basis ng Commissioner of Internal Revenue. For purposes of this section, a controlled participant's cost of developing intangible for a taxable year mean all of the cost incurred by that participant related to the intangible development area, plus all of the cost-sharing payments it makes to other controlled and uncontrolled participants, minus all of the cost-sharing payments it receives from other controlled and uncontrolled participants. Cost incurred related to the intangible development area consist of operating expenses. Kaya nga sinabi na kanina yung direct cost at saka yung mga indirect cost, no? So dito naman sinasabi yung operating expenses as defined in section 1.425D3 other than depreciation or amortization expense, plus to the extent not included in such operating expenses as defined in section 1.482-5D3, the charge for the use of any tangible property made available to the qualified cost sharing arrangement. Okay. So operating expenses are defined as including all expenses not included in cost of goods sold except for interest expense, foreign income taxes, and domestic income taxes, and any other expenses not related to the operation of the relevant business activity. Bakit? Itong mga sinasabi niya not related to the operation, hence not included in the operating expenses. Kasi itong mga sinasabi niya na mga expenses dito, kagaya ng income tax, of course, these are not deductible as operating expenses when you compute the net taxable income, no? Kasi statutorily required talaga na hindi mo isama yung income tax expense mo in computing for a taxable income. Why? Kasi hindi talaga siya deductible, no? Chargeable siya against retained earnings. How these various provisions interact is the crux of the parties' dispute, no? So ito yung sinasabi ng korte na may gray area between the regulations at saka yung provisions ng batas, no? Sa section 482. Section 1.482-1B1 specifies that the true taxable income of controlled parties is calculated based on how parties operating at arm's length would behave. The language is unequivocal. This arm's length standard is to be applied in every case, no? So in the context of cost-sharing agreements, this would require controlled parties to share only those costs uncontrolled parties would share. By implication, costs that uncontrolled parties would not share need not be shared, no? So yung cost ng uncontrolled parties daw need not be shared. So in contrast, section 1.482 specifies that controlled parties in a cost-sharing agreement must share all cost, no? All cost related to the intangible development area, and that phrase is explicitly defined to include virtually all expenses not included in the cost of goods sold, no? Okay. So, lahat ng expenses. Okay. The plain language does not permit any exceptions, even for costs that unrelated parties would not share. So, its provisions, plain language mandates a different result. Accordingly, we conclude that two provisions establish distinct and reconcilable standard for determining which cost must be shared between controlled parties in cost-sharing agreements specifically related to intangible product development. No? Kaya nga sabi natin sa inyo, in this case, talo ang Commission of Internal Revenue dito because of some ambiguities in their tax laws. Pero noong 2017, remember this case is 97, 98, 99. Noong 2017, kinurek na yan ng US, no, yung kanilang batas dyan. That's why, if this case is litigated currently, talo na yung Xilinx dito. But since 97, 98, 99 pa, panalo yung Xilinx, no? The structure of the regulatory regime confirms this conclusion, no? Kasi kahit na sinasabi ko na sa inyo yung result ng decision ng court sa case, hindi pa magtatapos dyan yung aral natin eh. Why? Kasi we have to know bakit natalo ang Xilinx dito. No? We have to deal with the substance of the case. No? Hindi yung, talo yan. No? Oo nga, talo. Pero paano siya natalo? Yun ang dapat mong alamin. No? Hindi yung alamin mo lang yung result ng case. Yung deliberation during the trial of the case, yun ang alamin mo. At saka yung mga points presented and argued. Oh, yan tayo matututo eh. Kasi kung sabihin mo lang yung decision, yes or no, madali lang yan eh. But what transpired during the litigations, yun po, yung presentation of evidence, yung rebuttal ng evidence, yun ang pinaka maganda para mas maintindihan mo yung case. The structure of the regulatory regime confirms this conclusion. No? Section 482(1)(b)(2) explains that Section 1.482(2) through 1.482(6) provides specific methods to be used to evaluate whether transactions between or among members of the controlled group satisfy the arm's length standard, and if they do not determine the arm's length result, Section 1.482(1)(c)(1) best method rule explains how the commissioner and taxpayer should determine which of this method provides the most reliable measure of the arm's length result. The two primary factors to take into considerations are the degree of comparability between the controlled transaction or taxpayer and any uncontrolled comparables, and the quality of the data and assumptions. So very important po ito, used in the analysis. No? Tingnan nyo, may analysis na sinasabi dito. And this is what we call as the transfer pricing analysis. Notably, Section 1.482(7) is not included among the methods specified. No? In Section 1.482(1)(b)(2) for determining the arm's length result and the comprehensive definition of cost related to the intangible development area does not implicate the factors identified in Section 1.482(1)(c)(1). Thus, Section 1.482-1 through 1.482-6 establish a sophisticated methodology for comparing controlled transactions to uncontrolled transactions that is generally applicable when determining what items must be allocated among related parties. So the regulatory regime then addresses a particular type of controlled transactions or cost-sharing agreement related to intangible product development and establishes a comprehensive definition of what cost must be shared that does not turn on similar uncontrolled transactions. No? So, very specific na. Section 1.482-7 thus appears to be a self-contained provision creating an exception to the general methodology established in the earlier provisions. As long as taxpayers comply with the requirement of sharing all intangible development costs proportionately to the expected benefit, requiring, requiring its participant share of intangible development cost reflect that participant share of anticipated benefits. No? So, kasama na yung anticipated benefits in the valuation of your intangible. They are assured the district director will not make allocation and revise the claimed tax liability attributable to the cost-sharing agreement. No? A bright line rule governs what cost must be shared rather than comparing the cost sharing agreement to similar agreements between unrelated parties. No? So, ito yung explanations. No? In fact, the regulatory history suggests the Secretary viewed cost-sharing agreement related to intangible product development as a unique type of controlled transaction, no? Meriting a distinct method of analysis. The 1986 amendments to 26 U.S.C. Section 482 reflected Congress' particular concern over transfers and licenses of intangible property. No? Kasi yung licenses ng intangible property, yung mga related expenses about intangibles, no? So ito na yung mga bagong expenses na kiniklaim ng mga businesses ngayon, no? Sa intangibles na related to intangibles. But the conference committee report explaining those amendments recognized that many important and difficult issues under Section 482 were left unresolved by this legislation and suggested a comprehensive study of intercompany pricing rules should be conducted. No? So yun ang suggestion. And careful consideration should be given to whether the existing regulations could be modified in any respect. No? In response, the Internal Revenue Service and Treasury Department conducted a detailed study of controlled party transactions, publishing its results in 1988. So, IRS Notice 88-123-1988-2CB458, the study primarily considered transfers of intangibles. So, kasi ito yung maraming issues, maraming cases itong transfer ng intangibles. But it also addressed the application of Section 482 to other transactions, including cost-sharing agreements, intercompany transfer pricing, and cost-sharing regulations under Section 482. No? The Secretary then promulgated the precursors of Section 1.482-1 through 1.482-6 and 1.482-7 in 1992 as a single proposed regulation. So ito yung unang regulations applicable to this case natin, 97, 98, 99. No? Okay. In 1992, a single proposed regulation but did not finalize the comprehensive all-cost requirements in 1.482-7D1 until December 1995. No? 6 months after the rest of the Section 482 regulations were finalized, the Secretary's separate regulatory action addressing cost sharing agreements related to intangible product development leads further support to our conclusions that the all-cost requirements is different from the arm's length standard generally applicable to another controlled transactions. No? So yun yung contentions. Because the all-cost requirement is irreconcilable with the arm's length standard, we hold Section 1.482-7D1 controls in light of the elementary tenet of statutory construction, that where there is no clear indication, otherwise, a specific statute will not be controlled or nullified by general one. No? Kasi ang specific statute, specific na yan eh. No? Hindi siya pwedeng i-amend ng general statute. No? Okay. Applying this canon of construction to regulation, section 1.482-7 applies to cost-sharing agreements related to intangible development, which is the particular controlled transaction at issue here, and specifies that all costs related to the intangible development area must be included in the pool of costs to be shared. No? So yun, ito talaga ang decision ng court, ng tax court. The general requirement in section 1.482-B1 that the arm's length standard should apply in every case involving a controlled transactions does not override such a specific provision. Okay. So we are not persuaded by either party's attempt to harmonize the two provisions, no? Kasi i-harmonize nila yung section 1.482 at saka yung regulations niya. So we are not persuaded by either party's attempts to harmonize the two provisions. Xilinx argues that section 1.482(1)(b)(1 in every case, no? Language requires us to construe in all cost requirements to mean that parties must share only those costs that parties operating at arm's length would share. No? Suggesting section 1.482(7)(d)(1 did not explicitly incorporate an arm's length standard because that requirement is implicit and controlling in the light of section 1.482(1)(b)(1. So, dito nagkakatalo na lang sa explanations, no? Pagandahan ng explanations. Although this explanation at first seems plausible, we are not ultimately persuaded. No? So, to read such a qualification into the precise and comprehensive language of section 1.482(5)(d)(3 and 1.482(7)(d)(1 would ignore the plain meaning and context of the cost-sharing provisions. Specified all costs related to intangible development. All means the entire number, amount of quantity, or every, no? Lahat. And related, no? Means connected or associated. These terms taken together with the regulation sub-definition describe a fixed set of costs that must be shared in their totality and that will not vary based on the type of intangible property being developed. Okay. Transporting an arm's length standard into section 1.482(7)(d)(1 would transform this apparently all-encompassing and self-contained description of the cost to be shared into a methodology under which the cost to be shared would not be fixed by these defined terms, but would rather ultimately be defined by the conduct of unrelated parties. Significantly achieving an arm's length result is not itself the regulatory regime, no? Regime's goal. Rather, its purpose is to prevent tax evasion by ensuring taxpayers accurately reflect taxable income attributable to controlled transactions. So during the regulatory process, the Secretary concluded cost-sharing agreements related to intangible development merited separate attention. No? So the plan language in the finalized section 1.482(7) articulates a bright line rule which appears to reflect a judgment that intangible product development through cost-sharing agreements present a special case requiring a distinct approach to ensure related parties do not evade taxes. So under the circumstances, we are reluctant to import a general standard into a comprehensive definition contained in a highly specific regulation. Okay. Ilan pa yung viewers natin?
5 viewers.
Ma'am, may tanong po si Ma'am Rosalina.
Oh, sige. Sige, ano tayo?
Opo. Ask ko po ma'am, may standard basihan po ba kung magkano ang cost ng intangible asset of a company?
Wala naman pong standard, pero ano yung dapat lang when we refer it to our tax code, no, anong sabi niya, at saka doon sa asset, siguro yung basihan na yung cost, we will go back to the asset na requirements, yung case nung Asset Inc. no versus Commissioner of Internal Revenue. Kasi ang tinatanong mo ano yung basihan o ano yung standard, no? Napakaganda ng Asset Inc. na ano na nakalagay dito kung papaano mo ano yung basihan mo kung magki-claim ka ng expenses, no? Una-una na, sinasabi din sa tax code natin, it should be ordinary and necessary. Kasi pag sinabi mong ordinary, yung intangible mo, research and development mo na dinidevelop, maliit lang o hindi naman masyadong malaki, no? Ang ini-aim mo, tapos nagki-claim ka ng pagkalaki-laki ng mga expenses, no? At saka ano pa yung sinasabi diyan? Ika-capitalize mo, hindi mo outright na claim lahat, especially if you are developing an intangible na later on that intangible ila-license mo, no? So yung cost mo for the development should be capitalized as the cost of that intangible that should be amortized later on, no? Napakaganda nitong case ng asset, no? Nandito yung standards, no? Ang sabi pa dito, papaano mo i-claim yung expenses, it should be directly attributable to the ano makita, no? It should be directly attributable to the product being developed, no? In case na nagde-develop ka nga ng intangible mo, no? Okay. So, ano pa ang sabi niya? Expense need be appropriate and helpful to the taxpayer's business, no? May mga cases sila ng citation sinasabi diyan. And then expense should be ordinary. Connote that the transactions which gives rise to it must be of common or frequent occurrence in the type of business involved. No? So, titingnan mo rin kung ano yung klase ng business. Kasi, iba-ibang klase ng business, iba-iba ang connotations ng ordinary and necessary expenses. Why? Because the expenses for a transportation company is, of course, different from the expenses of the manufacturing company. No? Ito ang, ano you have to prove that the expenses were ordinary and necessary. Yun ang number 1. Number 2, paid or incurred in carrying on a trade or business. Number 3, incurred during the taxable year in which the taxpayer seeks to deduct them. And number 4, paid by the person to whom the services were rendered or incurred. No? So yun yung mga requirements na masasabi mo na necessary and ordinary yung expenses, no? Pero yung sinasabi natin na standard, of course, it should be necessary and ordinary, and it would also commensurate to the business po ng taxpayer. No? Okay, meron pa? Okay. So, ano lang tayo, no? One hour lang po tayo ngayon kasi mayroon tayong seminar sa PICPA bukas, no? Yung Transfer Pricing Essentials Yan ang sa Northern Metro Manila chapter. So magkakandak tayo bukas ng umaga. And sa September naman, in-invite tayo ng PICPA Rizal. We will also discuss, no, the essentials of transfer pricing. Okay? So, this is only part 1. On Wednesday, magkakaroon tayo ng part 2, no, or continuation with the discussion natin dito sa Xilinx Inc. Why? Kasi, ang discussions dito sa Xilinx will revolve around the yung cost sharing, no? Although sa cost sharing arrangement, there are cases na palaging talo ang tax authority, no? Kagaya sa case na to, yung Commissioner of Internal Revenue, talo sila dito. So kagaya din ito nung case ng Amazon.com, yung Altera, no? Mga stock option din ang involved doon, talo palagi. But because of the amendment of the law noong 2017, kung itong mga cases na to nangyari currently, hindi na matatalo ang tax authority or ang Internal Revenue Service, no? Okay. Sige. So with that, I would like to say thank you very much po sa ating mga viewers. And let's call it a night. No? Stay safe, no po? Ang dami talagang victim ngayon ang yung kasama natin dito si Sir Eugene, COVID positive po yung father niya, no? Ako din yung last week talagang sobrang sama din ng pakiramdam ko. Pero rest lang, tapos pahinga, inom ng maraming tubig. So yun lang talaga ginagawa ko ever since. Ako umiinom ng gamot eh. Ang ginagawa ko talaga, water therapy. And then rest talaga. Nag-steam ako, pinawisan ako. Yun. Sarap na ng pakiramdam. No? Don't panic. Number 1 po talaga yan. Don't panic. Kasi pag nagpanic na kayo, tapos may mga iba pa kayong sakit na nakatago sa katawan nyo, wala na. Hindi kayo makakasurvive. No? Don't panic. Okay, so with that, I would like to say thank you po sa ating mga viewers and see you ulit on Wednesday.